Now, tomorrow marks Get Lippy Day, a campaign encouraging people to break taboos and speak openly about gynaecological cancers and the symptoms that should never be ignored. While most cancer diagnoses in Gibraltar are among older age groups, today's conversation highlights the reality that it can affect younger women too. Joining us in the studio, Francesca Makey, who was diagnosed with womb cancer at just 17 years old, Sophie Clifton Tucker Hedley, who's in her 30s and was diagnosed more recently with cervical cancer last November, and our very own Melanie Chipolina Guilliano, who was diagnosed in 2018 with cervical cancer while pregnant at the age of 36. So thank you all so much for coming in today and speaking about this very important topic. We'll get into the Get Lippy campaign shortly and some more of the specific advice that for our listeners. But to begin, just how important is it that we have conversations like today to get the ball rolling?
Yep, so I think that this is a great opportunity for the public and the community to get together to raise awareness for gynecological cancers. These are cancers that are found in the female reproductive system. So the cancer can be found in the womb, in the ovaries, in the cervix, in the vagina, and in the vulva. So the cancers that affect women, but inevitably most men have a woman in their lives, be it a mother, a daughter, a sister. So it's just a chance to get everyone speaking up openly, honestly, breaking those taboos surrounding some of the symptoms of the 5 gynecological cancers, which historically might be quite embarrassing or awkward to talk about, especially to male doctors, for example, or even amongst friends. No, it's not something that is openly spoken about. I think that we are getting better at this as the
I
years
think in
go
large
by.
part thanks to your Get Lippy campaign, because you've been speaking about this for so many years now, Francesca, and just using words like vulva, period, all these biological terms that would have before seemed taboo, but it's just our biology.
Yeah, so when I was diagnosed back in 2014, when I was 17, I didn't really feel empowered to speak openly as such to the doctors, especially when they would tended to be male doctors. I was embarrassed to tell the doctors, like, I'm having heavy periods and talking about bleeding, and it's not something very pleasant. I do think that we are getting better, and I think that that is having a positive effect in detecting the cancers earlier on, which is something very positive. Yeah.
Did you find that because you were so young at just 17, perhaps your symptoms weren't taken as seriously just because it's so rare for someone so young to be diagnosed?
Yep, so I was diagnosed with a rare form of uterine cancer, and uterine cancer is usually found in postmenopausal women. So it was very, very unheard of in a girl of such a young age. And I wouldn't say that I wasn't listened to, but yeah, to an extent, I was kind of brushed off, and several doctors or even family members told me, like, look, some women just have heavy periods, and unfortunately you're just going to be one of those women. Like, it is what it is. Just get on with it. Essentially, I was in school at the time. I was doing my GCSEs and my A levels, so I just tried to push through. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. Like, when I spoke to my friends, they weren't having these issues and they weren't bleeding for 30 odd days in a row, no? And it was thanks to my mom, who really pushed me to advocate for myself, that we started asking or looking into further investigation, which then finally led to my diagnosis.
And that's why it's so important to listen to our bodies and to kind of pay attention to those gut feelings. Sophie, your diagnosis came more recently, just in November. What led you to that diagnosis?
Well, truthfully, I had no symptoms, which is the scary part. The thing with early cervical cancer is there often aren't any, which makes having your smear all the more crucial. So I was just having my routine smear. Following the birth of my first child in 2022, I started having abnormal smears for the very first time in my life, but it was sort of borderline, and so I was put on that 6-month watch list. So you just go in every 6 months, have another smear. Same thing every time, a few colposcopies here and there. But then after the birth of my second child, things just seemed to escalate. I think probably the hormones played a huge part in this. And yeah, then I got my diagnosis in November.
How quickly did life change after hearing those words, you've got cancer?
Well, like we said, I think everyone's been touched by cancer in some way, and I try to be honest without sounding like a sad documentary, but it's a bit abstract until it happens to you. and you're sat in that chair and they say that word, and then you're like, wow, okay, so this is what that feels like. It's kind of deafening. It's like a deafening panic, especially when you have children, but even if you don't, it's scary.
Yeah, but two very young children also working and juggling, everyday life, which is demanding. You've undergone several procedures and surgery since your diagnosis. So how difficult has that experience been for you, both physically, but also mentally, emotionally?
Yeah, mentally, quite a lot, as you say, with kids. And I gave birth not even that long ago. So I'm in postpartum period of my life, and I've got two young kids running around my feet, and it's a lot to juggle physically as well. It's hard to heal when you're picking up a toddler and a baby that is weirdly the size of my toddler, but much better than the alternative, so can't complain too much.
Well, you're here today speaking very bravely, so thank you. I know it hasn't been that long since this whole experience, so I'm sure it's still very fresh in your mind. But how has your diagnosis changed, perhaps how you speak about these issues with people in your life? As Frankie said, no, very often it still seems like a taboo subject.
Yeah, completely. It's shrouded in shame, and I don't know why, because it's not the same really with our male counterparts. And I think it does start with education when kids are young, using the correct terminology, as you say. We just call all of it like nunu or fairy or whatever. No, like name your parts. You've got your vagina, your vulva. You need to know these parts to know when something's wrong and how to explain that to a GP and not ChatGPT.
Melanie, you were diagnosed in 2018 with cervical cancer. Of course, a lasting impact as well that you've had on your life. You've been using social media as a platform as well to kind of share your story. How important was that for you?
The sharing of my story, it's taken a while because I think it's only been this past year and a half where I felt comfortable sharing it. Also, my children weren't aware of it. So it was only by accident that my son stumbled upon an interview I did in Pamplona, because he was going to do some sort of ChatGPT photo of me. And he came across this interview, so I had to tell him the truth. So I obviously shared it with my daughter. But that was such a huge relief because now I felt I could share, because I wanted to share the story. I wanted, for people to have that awareness, because you just don't think it's going to happen to you. You hear the stories, and I think that's part of the reason why people they're aware, but they're not, because you think, that's not going to happen to me. No way. That's in the movies, or someone in the other building or something, and through the Instagram page, I've been able to not only share my story, but also just try to motivate people, because I know how it affects you mentally, physically, and you'll have good days and you have bad days, and you don't have to have cancer to follow my page. I mean, it's not specific to that. So if you're going through anything, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days, and it's just accepting that that's life, and trying to find the positives in the tiniest of things that are happening, and even your focus, because I've done it myself. I've spent many years being not so much negative, but sad, upset, scared, worried. But slowly I've managed to find a way of turning that around. And I wake up and I try my best, even if my body hurts or just having a bad day, to focus on the things that I enjoy, do something small, anything that's just going to pick you up. And the more positive you are, the more positive your outlook is. And I know that some people don't believe that, but it's true. If you put out good energy, you see good energy. If you're focusing on the negative, you just pick up the negative. And even if you start small, eventually you'll get there.
So focusing on those glimmers of hope and positivity. It's interesting because each of your stories is very different in terms of getting that diagnosis. So if you'd like to share how it happened for you.
Yep. So I remember back in 2017, I was actually at the Island Games. And on the night that we arrived, I had a bleed, which was right in between when I was meant to have my period. I just put it down to the flying, maybe, the excitement or something, I don't know. And then a few months later, in September, I had another one. And I can be a little bit of a panicky person when it comes to medical things. So I thought, I'm going to the doctors to see what they say.
No, I think it's fair enough to say as well that this isn't just being a panicky person, it's being responsible.
I know, but sometimes
and listening to your body.
I think maybe that's what happens to all of us. We all think like we're being over the top. Here we go. But I thought, I'm going to go. And
because maybe it's, you're being exaggerating
I
or
was
hormonal.
36 also, like I'm not old, I think, but I wasn't 20. So I thought maybe changes in the body. I'd had my 2 children already and everything. And they just said to me, look, if it happens again in 3 months' time, come back. So time went on. I'd gone private. Nothing came up there. And then I found out I was pregnant in March. So I was in the early, I think I was like 7 weeks pregnant. And I had quite a big bleed. Now, I had miscarried twice previously. So I knew what they looked like. It did look a bit more, but I thought, let's go to the hospital just in case, because it was excessive. And they put it down to the pregnancy. So I went home on a Saturday morning. It happened again, even more so. Back to the hospital, they did a scan, an ultrasound, and they said I had like a growth of some sort, which I knew was there, but I had told it was just a growth, something that could be removed whenever I felt comfortable to have it removed. So they said, look, we'll keep you in because obviously the bleeding is continuous and see what happens. And then on the Monday, I don't know how much blood I'd lost, but I was unable to even walk or get up. So they had to take me down in my bed. Did another ultrasound and internal ultrasound. Don't know what he was looking for. It was exactly the same as when I went in on Friday. But then when I got to my room, there was surgeons and all sorts of people there. And they had to rush me down because I'd lost too much blood. And I had a lesion that was the cause of the bleed. So they were hoping to either remove the lesion or do a hysterectomy. Obviously, I was pregnant at the time, but I was feeling so... I don't even think I can remember what was happening. It was just a daze. I woke up from the operation. They were able to take the lesion out. That was a Monday. Went back home on the Wednesday.
So they didn't have to do the hysterectomy at that moment?
They didn't do the hysterectomy, so that was fine. I was with extreme morning sickness, so I thought, okay, great. And then on the Friday, I get a phone call saying that I was having a CT scan on the Monday. And I panicked. I don't know what my body... I think I knew something was not right, but I didn't know. My body knew something wasn't right. So I just had this major panic. Rushed down to the hospital because they didn't know what the CT scan was for. And luckily I came across a nurse who I can't remember who she was, but she was like an angel. She sat me down on a chair. She called the surgeon and he came back and he apologized. He said that he was hoping to have spoken to me before they gave me the appointment. And he just told me that I had cancer. It was the 13th of April, Friday the 13th of April, to be precise. And it was just like, I don't even think I was taking it. I was just, you expect a cancer diagnosis to be this big, like, explosion of fear and crying. Oh, it wasn't. I just sat there on the chair and it was like, I was so exhausted. I was just like, and then I remember just walking out with Gina, with my husband. It was actually my cousin's husband's birthday and we were meant to meet up. And we literally just went. We just walked like that, just like zombies, and just sat down. Yeah. And it was, from there, it was like scans, went to the UK, ended up in Pamplona, and then I had to go through the full-on treatment. So it was brachytherapy at the end, chemotherapy and radio. And unfortunately, that comes with a lot of side effects. So, well, first off, I had to lose a baby. So that in itself was a major...
Trauma.
The fear of not dying, but leaving my children without a mother. You know, they were very young at the time, and you just think, who's going to look after my children? Like I do, you know. We're the ones that we know the plans, we know the days of school, we know what they like to eat, when they like to eat it, football, gymnastics, all sorts. And that was the only thing. And I was so stressed that I couldn't stay still. My legs had like severe restless leg syndrome. So I couldn't sit down. Even when I went to eat, I had to get up all the time, and it lasted for weeks. And then you just go through the motions. When it comes to treatment, you just go, you do it. I can't say anything negative about Pamplona. That's like walking into heaven, I think. The staff there are amazing. You walk in, they know you by name, they're kind, and they understand what you're going through. The relationship was fantastic. The checkups were great. But of course, on the body, it takes a toll. So I went into menopause straight away. I was only 36 at the time. So you have to be careful, like with having your bone scans, the menopause, all the hormones. So I was already hormonal from the pregnancy, from losing the baby, and then going into to menopause.
Is this something that you also had to go through, Francesca? Correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to go.
I went through the menopause when I was 17.
Wow.
Also doing my A levels. So I feel you with the joint pains, the hot flashes. Like I've been through all of that.
Have you had to go on any sort of hormonal treatment?
I was on hormonal treatment for 5 years after. So, my cancer was contained to the uterus, so I didn't have to have any chemo or radio after. They just removed my uterus and essentially removed the cancer. But because I was still very young and I did have plans one day, hopefully, to have my own biological children, they kept my ovaries. And to keep my ovaries functioning, I did go through hormonal treatments for 5 years in the form of injections, which put me into the menopause. And thankfully, that all worked, and my ovaries kept working, and I was able to have an egg retrieval. So that was something positive that came out of the negative.
I have to say good afternoon to Jenny, who's been in touch, saying my hearts and prayers go out to all of you. Heidi as well has been in touch and says, thank you all for sharing such personal journeys with honesty and strength. Your voices can encourage early checkups and awareness. And as she always says, early detection saves lives. We have another message here from Mrs. V, who says, incredibly moving, Gibraltar Today, such a brave group of women. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. That's from Layla. Thank you so much for getting in touch. I know, Frankie, that you've been working on this campaign for years now, and you've been working with the gynecology department in the GHA. One of the things you've introduced this year is the ABCDE message to kind of get word out there on what we should be looking for. Can you go through those signs?
Yeah, of course. So I've been working very closely with consultant gynecologist Dr. Gerges from the GHA, and he actually came up with this ABCDE system to try and kind of spot the red flag symptoms, because like you said, some, like you are asymptomatic, so some of them are less easy to detect, like the heavy bleeding is quite a big one, but there are many others. So the A is any changes in your abdomen, so any abdominal bloating, loss of appetite, weight loss. The B is for bleeding, which is probably the most obvious one, and actually abnormal bleeding is one of the key signs of 3 of the 5 gynae cancers. So that includes bleeding in between periods, post-menopausal bleeding, so bleeding after the menopause, and bleeding post-intercourse, and any abnormal bleeding that isn't normal for you. The C, changes in the vulva. So looking at your vulva, any itching, any lumps, any ulcers, or any bleeding. The D is for discharge. So any unusual discharge, smell, colour. It's always important to check your discharge. Any blood stained discharge, get that checked. And the E, we wanted to find something for pain, really. So we put excessive pain, pelvic pain, coital pain, or any new or unexplained pain that is not usual for you. So if you do have any of those symptoms, and if they are persistent, please go and get checked. No question is too silly, and it could save a life, and it's proven that early detection does save lives, especially when it comes to gynecological cancers. If they are caught early, they can be preventable. So please do get those seen too.
Good afternoon to Katia, who says, thank you for sharing your experiences and your stories. Awareness is key to early detection. And also to Lorraine, who says, thank you as well. She says, you are all beautiful and strong ladies, and she's wishing you all strength and health. So lovely messages coming in for all of you. Just to wrap up, what would you like to say to anyone who perhaps is delaying their smear test or trying to ignore symptoms because it all feels a bit too overwhelming? What would you like to say?
I mean, at the end of the day, it will come. If it is cancer, you cannot hide it. It will not go away on its own. If you're scared or worried, find a friend, find a family member who would advocate for you, because I've come across people who might be too shy to fight for themselves. Get that feisty friend or family member and take them with you.
My main message is to know your body. So recognize what is normal for you and what feels abnormal. And again, to speak up openly, honestly, using the correct terminology, and not to feel embarrassed or ashamed when speaking about your gynecological health.
Yeah, just book your smears, because either you'll find out you're fine, which is great, or you'll catch something early enough to do something about it, so it's a win-win. And not knowing is not a form of protection, it's just delaying your ability. Also, the smear itself is so quick.
Yeah.
I mean, go in with a pair of AirPods and put on Bohemian Rhapsody before the song ends. It's over. You won't even get to the Galileo bit. So just
They should use that in the official campaign.
I think so.
Can I just say that
Yes.
I've got the
Yes,
phone
please,
number?
Francesca.
So there is an appointment helpline that meant to be open on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4 p.m. to 6:30, and on Saturdays from 9 to 12. That's 200 50666. So you can call and check and see when your next smear test is due. The government has rolled out a new cervical screening program last year, where they've been sending text messages to women who are due their smears. But if you haven't received a text message, it's maybe because you're not due one yet. But you can check the status of your next smear test with 200 50666.
200 50666.
Yes.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Can the awareness also be for the medical staff and professionals? Because we can know our bodies, but if you go into an appointment and the GP doesn't listen to you, then you're kind of stuck. So I think when we talk about awareness, and this goes for any disease, it's very important that the medical staff are also aware. I know that they're there as a GP, but you need to listen to that person. That person knows themselves better than you do. And obviously they're the professionals, but sometimes people feel that they're not heard. And I think it's very important that they are, because we can do so much, but then it's in the hands of the professional. And if they don't listen to you, then it becomes a very difficult situation.
And on that note, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Rebecca Tidswell and Agnes and all that team, because
Agnes.
Susie,
Agnes, love you.
Yeah.
they have been fantastic, and yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Special shout out to Agnes.
Agnes.
Well, thank you all so much, really. It's such an important subject. You've all been very open and honest. I really appreciate it. We've been speaking to Francesca Makey, Sophie Clifton Tucker Hedley, and Melanie, Chipolina, Giuliano. And tomorrow's Get Lippy Day. So put on your red lipstick, take some selfies and tag it, Get Lippy. And you can fundraise. There are pins being sold and fundraising for a very worthy cause. Thank you.